All right. Well, it looks like it is 2 o'clock straight up, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know we have some people in and out and back and forth and side to side, and that's just the nature of nature of the world we live in. Um, so we're also recording this, so if you miss any parts of it, that's totally fine. I do think that this is one that is so worth uh, spending the time, spending at least an hour, turn off all of your notifications, and print the stuff. If you didn't get it from the invitation, it should be in the chat window. If you don't have it in the chat window, just raise your hand, and if John or Angel could send that to you, that would be great. You said something, John?
Say it again, because you were frozen there for a second.
I was frozen?
Not now.
Okay. I hope I didn't freeze with my mouth open and my eyes shut, because that's usually the way it works. Yeah, so basically, please do turn off your notifications, print the materials. If there's ever an hour that you will not regret spending, it is on this. And there might be a situation where you will be very, very happy that you did this. You have a plan in place in case something happens in your business. And to be honest, if nothing bad has ever happened to you, you haven't been in business long enough. There's always something, and it's always unexpected, but it is the people that expect the unexpected are the ones that typically come through it with flying colors and make that work really well. So I guess the first and most obvious thing is, why would we want to plan a disaster, right? Disasters happen all by themselves. We never know when they're going to happen, and we cannot possibly know what could possibly happen to our business, but we can do some things to think about the most likely and the most severe of the things that could happen to us and make a plan so that they don't impact our business, impact our customers, impact our situation negatively. So please, 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 print the materials from this and take notes and come up with at least a rudimentary plan. By the end of this hour, you will be much better prepared than 99% of the business owners in America, I think. Do you agree with that, John?
Hang on a minute. I'm trying to catch up with stuff here.
Okay, cool.
Now, what are you saying?
Oh, I just said if you have even a rudimentary disaster recovery plan, you're probably doing better than 90% of the businesses in the US, much less the world. So,
Yeah, well, yep.
okay. So hopefully everybody has the materials, and we can carry on. So, what you're going to end up with at the end of this hour is a tailored crisis response plan. We have a very elementary one in the PDF. And then you also have a Word document that you can take home and do as homework. Obviously we can't do it in an hour. There are so many details and so many things that should go into that. And you really should spend some time with your team, putting all those details together, and then make sure you put all of those documents in a safe place, share them with your team, make sure everybody knows, and so on. So we're going to talk about risk management skills. We're going to talk about PR strategies. We're going to talk about role assignments. And we're going to talk about a resource kit blueprint. So you're going to walk away with the elementary, and then, you have the outline for a much more detailed one. If you have a poll on your screen, you're welcome to answer that. Which of these are you the most worried about? And whichever we get the most votes for, that's going to be our crisis of the day, right? For our exercises and role plays and everything else that we do in this session. So share your favorite crisis, right? But if we plan one, then there's the same process to plan for any of them, right? Okay, carrying on. All right. First of all, let's just kind of go around the room. I think most folks are here by now, that are going to be here, and just let us know who you are, what you do, and if you haven't answered the poll, what is your most likely disaster? What are you the most worried about in your line of work. My name is Paula Williams. I am a marketing consultant for ABCI. My primary panic is data. I worry the most about losing files, losing data, websites going down, that kind of thing. So they all kind of fall into the category of data incidents, I guess, more than anything else. John.
Yeah, well, data or privacy breach, and as far as I'm concerned, that has to do with our internal network.
Mhm.
We can't do a lot for the website. That's on the website people. But I
Mhm.
can, but I can and do a lot for internal stuff.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
we plan for a lot, and we have been able to sidestep or mitigate almost, in fact, all of the ransomware attacks, the DDoS attacks, everything thus far.
Right. Except for perhaps an employee losing a file or, little things like that.
Yeah,
But human error.
well, I'm talking about our internal network.
Agreed. Okay. Fantastic. Angel, if we can put you on the spot, I know, you have a slightly different situation. You're out of the country. You probably have different things going on there that you may, maybe it's the internet going down. I don't know what it is in your situation, or if you want to share.
Yeah, I am Jolica Deligas, and I am Paula's executive assistant, and I'm located in Philippines, and we usually have a lot of disasters here, like storms and all that. And from my previous work, we always encounter communication failures because once there's a disaster, our lines are always cut off, and that is really what we always experience.
So super disruptive. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Please state, Steve, about that's lost the federal government.
Sorry, Stella, is that you?
Yep,
Yep, I'm here.
For the what?
Has
Excellent.
lost the federal government from deporting people.
So probably my biggest fear living out of the country as well would be, when the internet goes down for long periods of time, which is known to happen here.
All I
Yeah.
have to say is, I dare them because it'd be like sanctuary cities, but worse.
Okay. Michael, I'm going to mute you. I think you may be having a different conversation. Sorry, Stella, go ahead.
So that would probably be my biggest frustration is when, the internet goes down for long periods of time. And, there's here they'll say, oh, we'll have it up in an hour. Well, that hour may mean a day, a week, a month. Yeah. They don't mean an hour usually.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, one of our team members right now is having an internet outage and things like that. And we were talking about, one of our backup plans for that is to check into a hotel, and that's still less expensive than our next option. Just check into a hotel that has Wi-Fi,
Well,
which might work if it's not a widespread incident or something like that.
yeah, one of the ways I've dealt with it is I've actually got two internet providers. So hopefully if one goes down, the other one is still up. It usually works, but not all the time.
Right. Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. All right. Anybody else want to share your favorite disaster, or what you're the most worried about?
Hi, this is Kelly Rittenhouse, and I have a couple of them. I'm a director of aviation, so
Of course.
but so just the standard horrible situations. But in addition, just recently, some security items, some exposure to our clients that wasn't expected, and then it raises a threat of their security. And then because we operate into a lot of international places, I have all of those same things about being able to stay in contact with people on any given, we're on the opposite side of the world, time zones, all of those changes. So that's very challenging for us.
Right.
Indeed. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for sharing. That is really good to know. And you're probably like in a nexus of problem solving, for a lot, because you do a lot of different things, with your clients. So, there's a lot of data, a lot of assets, a lot of things that are at risk all the time. And so you got to be on top of all that. That's amazing.
Yes. So it's just interesting just to also then touch on what you guys are talking to, all the business continuity factors that you don't really think of, like the initial event and then everything that goes from there. So thank you.
All right. Sounds great. Okay. Michael, if you have a favorite disaster, we'd love to hear it. And I'm not going to put you on the spot, though, if that is not the case. So we'll carry on from where we were, if I can figure out how to do that. We have a new version of Zoom, which is kind of a nice little disaster in and of itself. We get to do a treasure hunt every day when we figure out what's going on with this. So let's see if I can share the right screen. Yeah, that is yet another potential disaster, is having different software updates that throw you for a loop. So that's kind of a fun one as well. All right. So hopefully you're seeing my slides at this point. Okay, go like this. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we do have a lot of common risks in aviation. And interestingly, when I did this poll, very scientific poll on LinkedIn, the thing that most people mentioned was airside incidents. And of course, that was what you would think, since most of my connections are aviation people. That's the thing that comes to mind, is you're talking about the plane crashes on the airfield near your flight school, or you're talking about the equipment failures, or anything else that happens airside. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But the most common disaster in any business right now is a data related one. Ransomware, data loss, loss of internet, loss of communications, loss of digital ability to do things. Those kinds of things are the most common, maybe not the most impactful disasters. But what I'm going to want you to do right now is write down what could possibly go wrong, in your business. What are the things that could possibly go wrong in your business? And if you can think of a few of them, and then rate the severity from 1 to 10, from a customer stubbing his toe and getting mad and swearing at you, that would be a 1. A number 10 would be like your entire facility burning to the ground in a dramatic conflagration and losing everything. So, that would be a severity rating. And then the next thing would be a likelihood rating. So, you'll probably have less severe things that are a lot more likely, and vice versa. So then what we do is we total that score, and go with the one that has the highest points. So something that's 20 points would be something that is super severe and super likely. That's the one you got to tackle first. That is the crisis that is the most likely to happen to you and the most likely to have a large impact on your business. Does everybody follow that exercise? It would be interesting to find out if you have the same answer that you did before in terms of your favorite disaster. My favorite disaster is still data related. John, have you changed your opinion at all?
Nope.
Nope. Anybody else want to share?
No, because we've mitigated power, we've mitigated internet to a greater or lesser degree, and we can actually have multiple internet network providers coming in here, and our hardware is capable of switching instantly so nobody knows what's going on.
Right. Exactly. So, and what John's doing, and what all of us are doing, is basically we're taking an umbrella in case it rains. And it's been scientifically proven that if you take an umbrella, it is less likely to rain. Actually, I'm kidding about that. That is not scientifically proven. That is absolute crap. But it is the way it typically works, or at least it seems to work. the point is that if you're prepared for it, it's not going to affect you very much. And, so that's really what we're trying to do today is just have some materials prepared in advance, have a media kit on your website, have a disaster recovery folder in your shared resources in your Basecamp or on your SharePoint or on your whatever it is that you use for a shared resource with your team, wherever you keep your most important materials. And to be honest, we have not done this yet either, but we will after today, I promise. So this is going to be something that we'll be doing as a team as well. We practice what we preach, sometimes not always in the right order, right? Okay. So what can you do to be prepared for things that might happen? Things that you really want to do is to ensure that you've got your essential physical and digital assets protected as much as humanly possible. And so, your key documents, insurance policies, emergency contact lists, safety procedure manuals, ID if you need to, credit cards, whatever you have, copied those on a color printer and put them in a safe place. Whether that is on site at your facility in a safe, whether that is off site in a very safe place. You certainly don't want those getting out, but it can be very, very helpful to have that information in a situation where you need it. I know for personal disaster recovery, one of the things that was recommended to us before we traveled overseas is take copies of your passports, all of your important documents, and leave them with a family member when you go overseas. That way, somebody has those. And think about that also for your business. Take copies of everything that you would need to run your business, hard copies. I know this is old school, but if you had to start your business from scratch and you lost your network, is there anything that a hard copy would be helpful for? And then you also want to have digital copies as well of everything. So those physical copies you might want to have in a safe on your facility, and you may want to put another copy elsewhere in a different facility, or have some in a different city even. When we worked for Wells Fargo, we were the disaster recovery team. We lived in Salt Lake City, and the web services team lived in San Francisco. So if anything happened in San Francisco to cause their internet to break or their power to go out or, whatever the situation was, we were the backup team for them. So, if you're a large enough company, you can do that. And if you have multiple people in multiple locations, you can take advantage of that geographic diversity and make sure that you are able to recover, from anything that happens.
Let me interject something here.
Please do.
A common misconception is that if it's in the cloud, it's safe.
Right.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay.
The cloud is getting hit by hackers daily, thousands of times per second daily. And those guys that run those cloud systems, their cybersecurity is woefully lacking.
Mm-hmm.
So use the cloud. That's fine. Have it somewhere else, preferably 3 different places.
Yeah.
3 physically separate, different places.
Right. Exactly. And you can have physical backups of computer data. In fact, under my desk is a thing called a Pegasus drive that takes copies from our network every night and stores those using, on Apple, it's called a Time Machine. That's the software that backs everything up every night onto the Pegasus drive. And the Pegasus drive is John, maybe you can explain what that is. So if one drive goes bad, it stripes to the next one.
It's what they call a RAID drive, and it's level 5. So we can have 3 hard drives in there fail, and still it'll slow down, but it won't lose the data.
Right.
And in addition to that, we also have a thing called I forgot the name of it.
The Drobo drive?
It's on the network. It's a network storage drive.
Yeah.
And we put stuff there. We put it on a Pegasus. We put it in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes on paper as well.
Yeah. So Michael came to our studio and we shot video of Michael. And, the worst thing that could possibly happen is if we had lost that footage. So before he was even out the door, we were copying that footage, those digital files, to the Pegasus drive, which is under my desk. And when we were also copying it to Basecamp, which is in the cloud. So that's 3 different locations that we have our that footage or those digital files. And that way, he did not waste his time driving all the way to Tooele and bringing all of his stuff and doing a lot of work. So it's really awful when people do lose material. We cannot lose a client's material and stay in business for long. I mean, that's just not an acceptable thing. We were watching an episode of a show called Undercover Billionaire, where they were trying to open a marketing company, and one of the novices in this marketing company had shot a bunch of video on her camera, and then she dropped the drive that was stored on the floor and broke it before she had it backed up anywhere else. And so there was a moment of panic. Are we going to be able to recover this data? Because we just put our customer through all this work, and then we lost the data. So, we really can't afford that. So 3 different places is kind of our rule. Okay, so that's physical storage of even digital documents, whatever it is. Tools and technology resources. We do nightly backups of all of the websites that we host, including on Flywheel. And then we also have caching using software called Cloudflare that has what they call always-on caching. So if a website goes down, let's say the ABCI website went down, then if Kelly went to visit the ABCI website tonight, it might show her a version from this morning or from yesterday, but she would not see a blank page, and she would not see an under construction sign, or she would not see a blank screen or an error. So, that always-on caching is a really nice feature to make sure that things don't go down or things don't disappear on us. John uses a thing called Barracuda on our email. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that for a second, John.
Well, I was in cybersecurity for most of 20 years in corporate America and have worked with many of the large firewall companies. And most of them are so expensive, I could never afford them here. And it took a while to find one that had equivalent or better controls than places like Cisco and other things. And so that's what we have. We have a Barracuda. It is overkill. The one I got is rated for a company that has 220 to 300 employees. But when I talked to them, I said, don't try to sell me what you think I need. You sell me what I want. And the reason I have such a device is I have gone in and turned on every possible check on any data coming through it. And I want to be able to do that and still have a gigabit throughput.
Yeah.
Hence the large S. And I have various people double check my approach 2 or 3 times a year to make sure there's nothing new and I haven't missed anything. And it's quite a little piece of equipment.
Yeah. And it is expensive, for the software, for the training, for all of the stuff. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is huge. But it would be huger to have something disappear or, to have somebody hack into our network. So it is, it's just the reality of the world we live in that we have to pay for some of these things, and it gets reflected in our costs. So that's just the reality of doing business these days. Vision Aircraft Records, I would be remiss if I didn't mention them when we were talking about disaster recovery. They do digital aircraft records. And Larry Heinbaugh had written a book previously about different things that happen. And one of them was, I think it was a Learjet that jumped the chocks, ran into the side of a hangar, set off the sprinklers in the hangar. It was undergoing an annual inspection while it was, they had all of the records laid out on a table. They were going through and inspecting the aircraft outside the hangar. They had the records laid out inside the hangar. While they were running up the brakes, it jumped the chocks, ran into the wall. Sprinklers came on, destroyed all the paper records. So it was a perfectly fine aircraft that had to be totaled because all of the records were destroyed. And you cannot fly an aircraft that isn't airworthy, that doesn't have all the documents to prove that it's airworthy. So it destroyed itself in a way. I mean, it's a funny story, but it's a terrible story. When you think about how some of these things can happen, where it's not even that bad of a physical situation, but the paper records were destroyed. If they'd had those backed up digitally, then it would have been a really minimal incident. I think, there was a little bit of damage to one of the landing gear on the aircraft that could have been fixed, and they'd be back in business. They'd be flying the next day. So it's really, really, really important to do the digital aircraft records if you are in charge of aircraft of any kind. As a broker, as an appraiser, as an owner, as a manager, as anything, if you have influence over that decision, get them digital, at your closest opportunity, right? And of course, we have to mention another ABC client is Tim Bonnell. He specializes in aviation insurance, business insurance for aviation companies, and is a great consultant, great resource on risk mitigation and those kinds of factors as well. Because we do have some really weird risks that other businesses don't have. So it's really good to talk to an insurance specialist that knows our industry, right? Okay, and then next we're going to talk about communication methods, decide who does what when. If a person is out of contact, who takes over? What's the communication plan in the event of an emergency or a question? What's the backup plan in case the first method doesn't work? And the reason we do this is because of this. The absolute worst thing that can happen is when somebody says, I couldn't get a hold of so-and-so, so a decision had to be made, or I didn't have the information I needed, but a decision had to be made. So there was no plan, so I winged it. We don't want to be winging it in the aviation industry. That is just not cool. And whether or not you actually use your plan as written, it's really, really important to have one. So fill this in while you've got this printed and it's in front of you and you got a pen and you're just, sitting here. We want to make sure that we do this. What is your communication plan? How do you figure out who does what, especially within the first 24 hours if somebody hits the panic button? Who's in control of the situation, or who makes the decisions about the situation? Their name goes in this box. In some cases, it's going to be the CEO or whatever. If you can't get hold of that person, decide now who is the backup. And ideally, it is not, like in case of John and I, we always travel together. If one of us is unavailable, it's likely that the other one will be unavailable. So what our kids do, of course, is if they can't get hold of one of us, they call the other one. But, in our business, we want to have a different plan. We want to make sure that there is somebody who is in a different location than we are in case we happen to be hiking in a canyon somewhere outside of earshot, of whatever. So, we want to make sure that there's somebody available to solve problems at pretty much any time. And then who are the team members that would be in charge of that as well? But you really, really, really need to have someone in charge, and you have to have a backup to that person. Make sense?
And if you're talking PR, it needs to know somebody that knows how to deal with it.
Well, that person goes in this box right here. So
Yeah,
that might be a different person, but these guys need to be talking to each other. So
heck yeah.
heck yeah. Okay. Who's in charge of the physical facility? So I mean, if there's a number on the door, in the event of an emergency, call this number. Make sure that number goes to a human being who can answer the phone. And if they don't answer the phone within 4 rings or 5 rings or whatever, that number should roll to somebody else, or there should be another way of contacting the backup, whoever that person is. Right? So, the police drive by your facility in the middle of the night and they see that it's been broken into. Who are they going to call first and second, and ideally this will be automated so that that number will go someplace where it needs to go. Michael, you're absolutely right. We have so many wings in our industry. Winging it seems so reasonable. That's absolutely right. But in this case, we don't want to wing it. So who's in charge of the aircraft in the event of an emergency? Who's the lead and who's the backup? So it could be your DOM or your chief pilot or somebody. But then who is the backup for that person in case you can't get hold of that person? Who's in charge of customer service in an emergency? And who's the backup? Who's in charge of communications and PR? And who's the lead on that and who is the backup? And then you want to have at least a 3-step process of these are the things that need to be done in the event of any crisis. The first thing probably is for this person, the lead, evaluating the situation to communicate with all of these other leads. Whether that's by phone, by smoke signals, by Basecamp ping, by WhatsApp, by some means, make sure that you've got that figured out. What are steps 1, 2, and 3 in the first 24 hours of a crisis? Make sense? All right, cool. All right. So if you have your step 1, step 2, and step 3 for your PR team, your legal advisors, your technical experts, your facility, your customer service people, and you've got a human being who is in charge of each of those and a backup for each of those human beings, then you're in pretty good shape. This is probably a little old for this audience, but does anybody seen the Abbott and Costello Who's on First sketch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Exactly. I can't quote it. It's really good though. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know's on third. And, they go into this whole big, long conversation and nobody knows what's happening because their names are all who, what, and I don't know. And, all of those things. And it's really a funny comedy sketch, but that's the last thing you want to have happen within the first 24 hours if something has happened in your business. So, make sure that you've got step 1, step 2 lined out. And once again, you may decide to deviate from the plan, but at least you have a basis for communication. So you're going to say, you know what, we had decided that this is step 2, but the circumstances require something different. So here we go. You can refer back to this plan and change it as you need to. John, you're
size enough that you have got to have a good PR person leading the thing, because in business school, we had one of the local news anchormen come up and teach the PR class.
Fun.
Well, no, it wasn't fun.
It wasn't fun.
I mean, they give you this thing and then you're supposed to do it. And at the end of each scenario, he said, a good PR person, such as my son news person, can turn everything around and make you look bad.
Right.
A PR person can counter that and make you look neutral to good.
Yeah, they can't spin every situation, but they can certainly make it less bad than it would be if you have an inexperienced person talking to the media.
You have got to have somebody that knows the language and how to deal with it.
Right. And understands the motivations of the media as well. So, in fact, that leads very nicely into our next slide, which is dealing with the press. So, what we recommend that people do is prepare generic statements or press releases for their top 3 scenarios, but leave out the details. We can always fill those in later. So, if thing number 1 is a data breach, we talk about, here's what happened, here's who was affected, here's what we're going to do about it. End of story, and have all of that pretty nicely lined out. And then you can always fill in the details if something does occur. Once again, this is carrying your umbrella in case it rains and having this in your Basecamp folder about disaster recovery in case you need to pull that out. And heaven forbid that you should ever need to click that icon. But if it is there, you're less likely to have an emergency. It is very important to have that one designated spokesperson, because if they start talking to everybody in your company, they're going to get a different story from everybody in the company. a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I worked in law enforcement. I actually took the police academy exam. One of the, or police academy course, one of the lessons that we took was they had everybody in this course, and these are all law enforcement candidates, and they all know that they are observing a crime scene, right? So they're paying very close attention to this video. And, so we watched this video and then we answered a questionnaire about the video. And then we compared everyone's answers, and they were all different. And we were all unbiased law enforcement candidates, very intent on getting the facts right. And we all got it wrong. There were things that, we wrote down on our little sheet that nobody else saw. There were things that they saw that didn't even exist. In some cases, even people with the best of intentions will sometimes not get the story right. So you want to funnel all of that through one spokesperson so that you get a consistent story coming out. And you also want to back up in case your primary spokesperson is unavailable, but those people need to be in contact with one another as well. It also helps to have good relationships with reporters before the disaster. If you've got a nice list of reporters, like what Angel's been augmenting for us and putting that together, if you have a list of reporters that you've been communicating with and you've been sending them press releases and you've been having phone conversations with them, and when their birthday is and you're sending them birthday cards, all of that stuff really, really helps. Because you want to be sharing as much good news as you can before a bad news story happens. And you want to have those relationships so that they know that you're a straight shooter and they can trust what you say. But don't ignore the press, right? You want to be responsive, but you also don't want to volunteer too many details that are going to raise more questions than answers. Right. So even if you are best friends with a reporter, if you're in a crisis, you are in an adversarial relationship with the press because they want to find out what happened. They want to make as big of a story of it as they possibly can. They want to sell newspapers. They want to sell clicks. They want to make it as sensational as possible. That is just the business that they're in, and that is just how they get paid. So this is business, and so your job often is to either make the least of the story, make the story go away, or whatever. But the best outcome is if you can make a good news story out of it, which, serves you both so that, they get what they want. They get a good news story. And if you are friends with somebody in the media and you have a good relationship, then you can collaborate with them. They're a lot more likely to see the positive and basically not go out of their way to ruin your company if they had that opportunity. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had experience where
Okay. Go ahead, John.
I did an outstanding thing for a company.
Okay.
Somebody interviewed me, and this was before I went to business school. I told them, exactly what I answered their questions, and they spun it all wrong.
Yeah.
And it was just internal, for crying out loud.
Yeah. That happens, and you have to remember, they don't have our background. They don't have a stake in the industry. They don't understand airplanes. They don't understand our business. They're from the outside looking in, and their job is to find the most sensational part of what's happening and report it to the public that also doesn't know anything about the aviation industry, doesn't understand airplanes, doesn't understand any of that. So, we want to make sure that we are being careful, with that, and that we're managing that well. There is an entire section in this book that we read last month, about working with the press, and I highly, highly recommend this as part of this effort. If you haven't read the book, dig it out, and as you're going through your Word document, you may want to take note of some of those parts. We can't go into a ton of detail today, but I don't know if anybody wants to share any other stories or advice. Stella, I know you're a writer, not necessarily in the journalism part of the world, but you probably know journalists as well. I don't know if you have something you'd like to add to this.
Actually, I work as a journalist for a couple of
that's right.
publications.
Okay.
So I kind of have both sides of the story.
Yeah.
Writing as a journalist and, obviously the goal is to get the facts correct and to report accurately, but it's also to, like you said, get the clicks, get the, sell the magazines, sell the papers, whatever it is that, you're printing for.
Yeah.
Other hand, I've done press releases and work with companies who are putting out information, and at the same time, you need to be very clear and concise. And like that last one says, don't give more information than what you need, because it's just going to give them more opportunities to spin the story or to get things wrong. Whereas if you're, give them just the basic facts they need, much less chance of getting incorrect reporting.
Exactly. So, I know all of us have that, even if you're a very honest person, there is a version of every story that you're going to tell your best friend that may be different than the version of the story that you tell your mother, just because you're going to leave out a few of the things that she just doesn't really need to know. And, that's just the way people are. And this is one of those relationships where you want to be honest with everyone, but you don't necessarily want to volunteer any extra information, especially in a crisis and especially to the press. Anybody else have any experiences they'd like to share about that?
So this is Kelly. I had the previous role. I had the privilege of meeting an investigative news reporter who came to our facility to try to find out something about one of our clients that had been a news story featured on them, and he was trying to, get more information. And I was the first one to encounter him. I knew who he was, but I pretended like I didn't, and I gave him a full sales pitch of what our services were, because he was just trying to inquire what we were offering and things like that. And so that was my stall tactic until
Brilliant.
The senior VP came on scene, because I needed to not be the one that did what I was doing. I needed to do what I did, but it was hilarious because this guy got so annoyed with me. And I just was so excited to be able to share the services that we offered and how we did things and the benefits that we were able to give and on and on. And so it was a pretty good strategy in the moment.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And you certainly can do that. I guess the point is you don't necessarily have to, just because they ask for information doesn't mean you have to give it. So you can say, hey, I will get you those answers, but in the meantime, let me show you our amazing facility, let me tell you about all the other things that we do, and the things that you are authorized to say. You can keep repeating that. And selective ignorance is a wonderful thing. I guess I told you in law enforcement, people use that all the time. It's really, really great to sometimes uh, play a role, I guess, without saying anything that is not true. You certainly don't want to volunteer information, and you don't have to provide information simply because they're asking. You can say, you know what, I'm really intent on getting the right story out there as soon as we possibly can. But, there are some things that I can't share with you today. That is an okay thing to say. So, that's always a possibility, right? Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. If anybody else wants to share a press story, I know Ben deals with the press all the time as well. And so we'll carry on from there. All right. So another thing that you're going to have is social media. We do recommend that in your disaster recovery kit for your top 3 scenarios, you have posts prepared for your most likely situation, with here's what happened, here's what we're doing about it, here's what happens next. Just the basic facts of the situation. You put that on all of your media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you use it, whatever. You can have your spokesperson do a video of that message, whatever you need to do to, make sure that that story gets out there first. Because if often the first person to tell a story has the most influence over what people actually believe. And this is true in politics. This is true in, if you have little kids, one of them is going to be rushing to tell you the story before the next one does, about who broke the vase or who ruined the flowers or whatever and stuff like that, because they know instinctively that, whoever tells the story first is the one that is the baseline, against which everything else is going to be compared. So, information that we already have has a bias over any new information that comes after that fact. It's just a psychological thing. So you do want to get that out there first. The disadvantage to that is you are going to get questions, obnoxious comments. It's the internet. There's people on it. There's good, bad, and ugly people. So, you're going to get all kinds of things on your social media. So you're going to want to monitor that closely for the next little while. We have a triage, assess the message. If it's negative, evaluate the purpose of the message, and it could be an unhappy customer, a dedicated complainer, a comedian wannabe, or, someone with a genuine interest in the answer. Whatever their motivation is, if you can figure out what that is, then are their facts correct? If the facts are not correct, then you gently correct the facts. If the facts are correct, then you say, yes, I understand this is a problem. This is not the way we want things to be. Here's what we're doing, or, here is our plan. If you want to share your plan, or we're working on a plan, whatever you want to say, but make sure that you don't volunteer more than you're ready to. And, that the person who is set up to be doing your PR is the person that is actually doing your PR. And you have that responsibility outlined. Cool. Yeah, there are lots and lots and lots of horrifying trolls on the internet. So, you can always delete the message and you can always block that person. But, my bias is always toward, if there is a grain of truth in what they're saying, you want to respond to it, because they are not the only person who has doubts or questions or whatever. So yeah, if you want to explain what's happening, that's great. If you don't want to explain what's happening yet, just keep an eye on it. And as your plans evolve, you may be able to share more information later. But don't be bullied into sharing more than you need to, and don't lose your cool. It's really easy to get into an argument on social media, and the person that stays the calmest is always the one that wins in this kind of a situation. So you want to make sure that you don't lose your cool, no matter what people say. If it's positive, of course, same thing. If you want to respond, then add value or thank the person or whatever. If you don't want to respond, you don't have to. So it's your playground, it's your account on social media. So, don't let people bully you into making it into something it's not. Cool. Great. So that is also included in the Word document if you decide you want to take this to the next step. And I do recommend that you do. You may want to go ahead and fill out that Word document and share it with your team. John has a story, if you want to share it, about a situation where a disaster recovery plan was not shared with the team, and he had a mutiny to deal with because people didn't know that this is what the plan was, right?
Yeah, well, it was for one of our clients, and not you.
Not ABCI, right? This was a different company.
Company I worked for at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed to replace their data center because the roof fell in. Wow. Okay. So they had a disaster recovery plan and a hot site. This is for mainframe. So they did the thing. They declared a disaster. And then they told everybody they had to go out to this hot site in New Jersey or wherever the world it was. Every person in the complete company refused to go.
That's true. I was there actually in a different capacity, but yeah.
So then they go, oh, shoot. And there's actually a financial institution. And financial institutions are certified by various and sundry government organizations. And if they become decertified, it takes 6 months or longer to become recertified. Well, the people refused And then I was asked that night to put together a plan, and that's all I said. Can you put together a plan to rebuild this place? And of course. And they asked me to stay late and do that. So I got some people together and we did that. And I presented it to them the next day and said, can you execute it? I said, seriously? He said, yeah. I said, okay, but I'm going to need some people. And I said, well, we're having an all hands meeting. So anyway, I selected 7 people and we got the place up and running in 96 hours, believe it or not. And it went in production just as the regulators flew in that same day. And it all worked. But you got to have your people on board.
Right.
They didn't have.
Yeah. Which is why it's really, really important, I think, to get your team involved in it. One, brainstorming what are our worst possibilities, or what are our worst crises that we would have to manage, and then 2, what is our plan A, B, and C, in case of any of these things happening, and is everybody on board with that? Because if you're not on board with that, then you have to deal with the crisis and a mutiny. And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that your people are behind you. And then that turns into a good news story. I know SSC has a couple of good news stories. One where they had a hangar fire, and then they had flooding, from a tropical storm. So, but the community really rallied around what they were doing, and they helped. And actually, they ended up helping other people in the community because a lot of their aircraft owners were airlifting supplies into different places and things like that, and helping with a lot of different things. So, they were first on the scene. They were quelling the rumors. Of course, whenever there's a disaster, there's always rumors about why are all these helicopters sitting here? It turned out the helicopters were waiting for fuel. They needed power to get the fuel onto the helicopters to do the supply airlifting. And so you want to be monitoring your social media. You want to be making sure that you're in front of the story. And they did an amazing, amazing, amazing job. I mean, but Doug has great relationships with everybody in South Carolina and with all the media in that area. So, they pick up the phone and call him and ask him, is this true? Before they print it. So, that's a wonderful example of somebody that follows all of these principles. In fact, he pretty much wrote this. We could say he wrote this workshop for us because we watched what he did, and it worked really, really well because he has all those community ties and he has all of that stuff in place. And, he really manages disaster better than anybody I know. Except maybe John, who has also managed disasters as well. So,
Yeah.
and anybody else on the phone has probably managed many other disasters as well too, but I just don't know about it. So you guys may be way ahead of us. And if you've got anything to share, we'd love to add it to our process and add it to our workshop for next year, so that this is improving every year and upgrading every year, and that we're covering any new material that we need to. So that's pretty much all I had for you. Everything else is pretty custom to your business, but in your office hours, we'd be happy to talk about this and make sure that we're getting your plan together and getting that to work. Michael, happy to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be seen, not viewed.
Love that.
Sorry, I wasn't in my office, and so at the beginning, I thought I was on mute, and I was trying to get the camera to work. And anyways, sorry about the interruption.
Oh, no problem. That's a good example of disaster recovery. You recovered nicely.
Once upon a time, I did some IT work many months ago. And one of the things that I did was, basically the acquisitions that Corning had made, we needed to get them integrated into our corporate IT network. And one of the things that I did was we always had a landline at our facilities.
Yeah.
So we don't think of it in the day of cell phones or voice over IP or all these other things that we do, but particularly for the computer networks, to have a physical landline makes a huge difference, because the power for that line comes from the central office. And so you can have a full power outage and yet still be connected to the central office switch. And so if you need to make a telephone call, outside of your disaster area, send a fax, use a modem, and send data, whatever, having that old fashioned analog telephone, and it has to be an analog line.
Of course. Yeah.
So anyways, having that analog line connected from our switching, office at the different facilities into Corning's, IT network, made a big difference. So sometimes these older technologies, can be very useful when it comes to disaster. And I would say the same thing with radio. A lot of the cartels and other people are using radio, Motorola, old fashioned radios and stuff, because they're, they don't go down. They're not dependent on the cloud. And so sometimes as you look at disaster, you actually need to go back and look at older technologies.
Absolutely. Been there, done that.
Daniel in his background. Right? Yeah, John's a ham radio guy, and we actually have in our area a ham radio network in case of disaster.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of that. I think that because we live in, Michael and John and I all live in a mountainous area. So, there are cases in which cell technology is not that great, and especially in a disaster situation or whatever. So all of that is.
Yeah. Speaking of ham radio, that takes me back even a few more years. Back east, there was a big hurricane that came up the East Coast, Hurricane Agnes in 1972.
Oh.
That says how old I am. And so in 72, following that big flood in upstate New York, the guys at corporate, as it turns out, there were ham radio operators, and they enlisted the ham radio operators in the community to begin, communicating, basically creating a corporate intranet between upstate New York and New York City. And be able to, connect, and also there are other remote plants in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, et cetera. So they used ham radio until things, were back online. Well, following, some of that recovery, they actually put in place a ham radio network, and our Explorer post was part of that network, and we had a mobile ham radio unit. And so if there was ever some kind of a community disaster, our job was to get to the highest hilltop and then act as a relay point for, other stuff for the company. So, some of the old technologies which still exist can be really valuable, particularly as you get into emergency situations.
Absolutely. Right. It's so funny to think about. The internet itself was a disaster recovery procedure or a disaster recovery tool developed by DARPA, So, it was a lot of times the things that we develop for disaster recovery end up making our businesses more sustainable. And, you look at where would the world be without the internet these days, and would it have existed? I suppose somebody would have thought of it at a later time for a later reason, but having that government money at the very beginning was a really nice kickstart.
Yeah, that actually, it existed before DARPA existed. So that was the old ARPA net.
Oh, I didn't know
that. Net, and there were 4 universities that were on that ARPA net including the University of Utah, which was interesting. They're one of the 5 original ARPANET sites.
Go Utes. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. No, that's great. That's really cool. I'm a University of Utah person, so that makes me very happy, and I did not know that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to share about disaster recovery or anything else?
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Hopefully you learned some things that you didn't know before, and hopefully you're leaving with a plan that is more than what you had before. There's a line in Guardians of the Galaxy where they're all sitting around going, I have a plan. And then, the other one says, well, it's barely a concept. How much of a plan do you have? I have 11% of a plan. It's barely a concept. But at least we have a concept now, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you again soon.
See y'all.
Thanks, Paula.
All right.
John.
Thanks.
You bet.
Bye.